Never keep up. All right, here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's live stream with Wilfred Buck. We are so excited to talk about some really important information about the night sky, probably information you may have not heard before. And it's important that we take the time to listen to Indigenous knowledge, because if we think about Western science, it's kind of a new kid on the block. It's only been around for a couple hundred years, but Indigenous knowledge has been around for thousands and thousands of years and has so much to offer us. And so we are just really lucky to have with us here Wilfred, who's going to be sharing some of this interesting and fascinating information. Also, there is going to be a Q&A at the end. And so if you didn't get the form to submit your questions, you can find the link down below in the description box of the YouTube. And you can click on that link and submit your questions. And Troy here is going to moderate those questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Troy to introduce himself.
Tego, Sego, Swego, what wenu horado, Augusta Sarah Gero, Gandege, Niguagano. Hi, everyone. My name is Troy Miracle, and I'm the Indigenous Education Lead for the Hastings and Prince Edward School Board, but I'm also a member of Gandege, or some people know it as Tyndinega. And I'm happy to be here today. We had an amazing session this morning, and I'm looking forward to another one. It's always great to spend time with such knowledge keepers like Wilfred, and I learned a lot and made some connections. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to enjoy that too. So looking forward to it.
And just to put her on the spot, because she's here and joined us here. Hello, Tisa. Want to just say hello to everyone and introduce yourself? Because Tisa's actually been a part of this bigger collaboration, and we're going to share out that information after the session through email. So say hello, Tisa.
Bonjour, Gakanawia. Really good to be here to see my brother Troy and my elder and friend Wilfred, and my friends Jody and Tina, and everybody else that is listening in and watching. So my name is Tisa Fiddler. I am I work in Indigenous education at Thunder Bay Catholic District School Board. So I'm way up here, north of Lake Superior, and but I'm not even from here. I'm from further north of here. So about 500 kilometers north of here is home to me, and as well as Onegaming First Nation. And you will get to I don't know if they hear, I'm sorry, I wasn't here this morning, but I know we spoke about it a little bit on the other day about some of the videos and the people that were part of the videos. That is another one of my home communities, Onegaming First Nation. So
we're going to be sharing that resource link out afterwards through email that has that shares this big collaboration that Tisa's referencing and that Wilfred has been part of. And so if you want a little bit more than today, those will be made available for you. So now we're going to turn it over to Wilfred. He'll introduce himself and get started with today's sharing. Over to you, Wilfred.
All right. Hey, good afternoon. Yeah, it's afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I say, Wilfred Buck net is Nigasan, Opaskwayak Cree Nation. Nitamagin and Totem, Monkaskeeten. Greetings, my relatives. My name is Wilfred Buck, originally from Opaskwayak Cree Nation, north central Manitoba. I'm coming to you today from Winterpeg, Manitoba, where it's a balmy -25 without the wind chill. But they say it's supposed to get warmer, so hopefully that's the case, because we got a sweat lodge on Sunday. So anyways, I'm be honored to be allowed to be spending some time with you today, and I'm honored that you take time out of your day to listen to another perspective in regard to Atlatl, the stars. My people call of course, the stars, Atchagwasak, and that great sky that covers us is Gitchikizik, the great sky. And you're going to be listening to some of the perspectives we have on in regard to our northern hemisphere sky. My people, first thing you should understand is that every culture on the face of the earth have their own connection to the sky. Every culture on the face of the earth have their own constellations, their own names, their own identifiers for planets and all other phenomena in the sky. And every culture had made their own sense, and were very intimate with that sky. And Romans and Greeks were the lucky ones who got put into the school curriculum, but everybody understood about the sky. And it only makes it's only common sense because every culture on the face of the earth lived under that sky. So it's only common sense that they'd become familiar with that sky, because the sky was very important, especially if you lived on the land. You'd have to know the patterns of the weather. You have to know the directional finders. You have to know where you were at certain times. You had to know the phases of the moon, the sun. So these things were very, very, very important. And so every indigenous culture on the face of the earth understood about these things and used them. And every culture prior to the industrial age, agrarian cultures, they studied that sky because the sky was very important. So anyways, we'll begin. So my people, like I said, call those lights up in the sky Atchagwasak, the stars. And Atchagwasak comes from the root word Atchak. Atchak is spirit. And we're told that we come from up there. We're from the sky. We're from the stars. Some people even go so far as to say we're star people. Star people, in a sense, there's I guess different ways you can interpret that. For me, star people is in a sense that along the lines of one of the basic understandings of my people is that we call the energy that animates us. We call it Atchak. We call it Ishiguk. We call it these things in reference to energy. When we say there's a term called Kishigugak. Kishigugak in Cree refers to beings of light, beings of energy, beings of spirit. And the root word for Kishigugak is Kishigao. Kishigao is the light of day, that energy that's up in the sky in the daytime. And so that's the root word for Kishigugak, which is a being of energy, being of light, a spirit. For a lot of indigenous peoples, there are multiple ways we describe our world, and there's multiple names that are used for similar things, such as spirit. There's in the Cree language, there's probably 8 names that I know of when we're referencing spirit, and I'm sure in other indigenous languages it's the same thing, depending on what specifically you're talking about. And this is the case of First Nations astronomy, Indigenous astronomy. When we look at the stars, there's multiple tellings, multiple multiple understandings of various stars. Instance, the Big Dipper. You look at the stars of the Big Dipper, everybody recognizes the Big Dipper in the northern hemisphere sky. And we look at those stars, and in going to university and going to grade school, elementary school, middle school, all those parts of the educational system, we're told to look up at that sky, and we see Big Dipper as part of a larger constellation named Ursa Major. So the Dipper is an asterism, part of a larger constellation called Ursa Major. And that's all it is. It's nothing else. It's not interpreted in any other way. But for my people, we look at that Big Dipper and I can probably recite at least 8 tellings about those particular stars, 8 different perspectives on what those stars represent. And this is really confuses Western astronomers when I'm asked to speak somewhere and I talk about the stars in the sky, and I start telling one story about the Big Dipper, and then maybe 15 minutes later I'm talking about the Big Dipper again, but I'm referring it in another perspective, and some of them will stop me and say, "Excuse me, but you just said that the Big Dipper was the Big Bear and Mr. Muskwa." And I said, "Yes, that is the case, but it's also," and then I go on to explain the multiple understandings that we have. And this is just a reflection of the holistic view that Indigenous cultures have of their reality, of the world around them. Everything is not compartmentalized and broken down into little parts. Everything is seen as a whole, and all the implications and repercussions and the consequences we associate with making a decision or doing something. It affects everything else around us. It affects our reality, and so we try to see everything in a holistic sense, and that holistic sense asks us to be aware of what we do, or what we say, of the actions we take, because there's repercussions involved. So this image you're looking at shows you the northern hemisphere sky. Of course, we live on a big globe, a big ball in the sky, and we see half of our Milky Way. The southern hemisphere, they see a totally different half of our Milky Way, the half that we don't usually see unless we go to places like Africa, South America, Australia, New Zealand, places like that. Then, excuse me, we get another view of that sky that we call our Milky Way. So in our northern hemisphere sky, we're looking at images from Roman Greek mythology, Roman Greek understandings. And if you look at that Big Dipper on the left-hand side, one of the things that Big Dipper is a sort of like a wayfinder, a pointer. You take the 2 end stars of the bowl of the Dipper, you line them up, and you go straight across. And when you do that, you come to a star called Polaris. Polaris is the North Star. And the North Star is very important for people who are traveling at night in the Northern Hemisphere. Cultures all over the Northern Hemisphere refer to Polaris as a directional pointer, a navigator, very important for people who navigated in the night sky. So here's the image of the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, and the pointer stars that point to the Little Dipper, to the North Star. So the North Star scores the end star of the handle of the Little Dipper. So my people looked at that star and they call it Kiweetin. Kiweetin, from the word Kiwe. Kiwe means home. So that is the going home star, Kiweetinawa. Another term they use for it is Kiweetinakok. Kiweetinakok is like where we return home to. We return home to the sky, and or Kiweetin, the going home star, because that they understood that star stayed stationary in the sky. That was the only star that didn't move in the sky. In our northern hemisphere sky, out of all the stars, all the planets, that one stays still. Another name we have for that star is Ekagaatet. Ekagaatet means it's standing still. It stands still. It doesn't move. A good indicator of that, if you ever look at a time-lapse picture of our northern hemisphere sky, you'll see. Well, Julie has a video of that. So so what you're going to be looking at is a time-lapse video, and it'll show you how the North Star seems to stand still in the sky, and all the other stars dance around it. So right above that middle pine tree there is the North Star. And as you can see the sky advancing, it'll speed up, and pretty soon you'll see star trails and planet trails. and you can see comets whizzing by. So there it goes. Here comes the star trails and the planet trails. And right at the center of it is Kiwaitin, Polaris, the star that doesn't move. So it stays stationary in the sky, and all the other stars spins around it. So the reason it stays like that, it looks like that, I should say, is our Earth is tilted on a 23.5 degree angle as it orbits our sun in space. So our pole is pointing at space as it orbits the sun. So right now, at this particular time in space and time, our northern pole is pointing at Polaris, the North Star. And so as our Earth spins on its axis and our northern pole is pointing at Polaris, it looks like Polaris is staying stationary and all the other stars are dancing around it. It's standing still. And so we're told that maybe in 1,000 years' time, that Polaris won't be our North Star anymore. The axis of our pole will be pointing in another direction in space. And this is called, this is due to something called the Precessional Circle, the wobble of our Earth's axis as it spins around in space. As it orbits around our sun in space, it wobbles, sort of like a top, I guess. And as it does so, it points in various directions in the sky. At one point, when the Egyptians built the pyramids thousands of years ago, the star that our axis was pointing at was a star in Draco called Tuban. So Tuban was the North Star when the Egyptians built the pyramids over some thousands and thousands of years ago. So you can see Draco right here in the center of the picture, and then you can see Tuban and the Processional Circle. That dot you see there is the Precessional Circle, the circle that our Earth wobble, when in its wobble forms a big huge circle. So that's the star that the Egyptians built the pyramids on, used to align the pyramids. So right now our star is of course Polaris, and then at some later point other stars will be used for our North Star, such as Deneb and Vega. Deneb and Vega are part of the constellation Cygnus, and Deneb is the part of the constellation Cygnus, but Deneb, Vega, and Altar are the summer triangle. So you can see the wobble right there. So right here is the Processional Circle in orange, and you can see at the center of it right there. So our North Star is right on top of this. So it looks like this is a timeline. So this is the timeline here. And there's a star in Draco, which is close to this precessional center. And my people have a constellation, which is in reference to this star. It's called Pipun Pinesu. Pipun Pinesu is the winter thunderbird. And the winter thunderbird reminds us of the movement of time. It reminds us of the precession of time, and it reminds us of winter, and it reminds us of the North and how the North commands that winter. So the winter thunderbird reminds us that the winter, the ice, the snow, the cold is always there, and it makes itself known at certain times. And so one of the stars in Draco, which is the heart of the winter thunderbird, we call Mitai Gizik. Mitai Gizik means the heart of the sky. And that particular star, the heart of the sky, is very close to the center of the Precessional Circle. And so that heart that is why they call it the heart of the sky, because of it being the center of that Precessional Circle, and everything spins around it, around that point in space from our perspective on Earth. And so that there just reminds us of how long Indigenous cultures have been studying the stars, studying the sky, because that Precessional Circle, it takes 26,000 years to complete one complete cycle, one complete loop. 26,000 years, and the heart of that star with at the heart of the sky, near the center of that Precessional Circle, it was observed that that was a very important place in space in reference to where we are. And so that just tells us that Indigenous people have been studying the sky for quite a long time, because they're talking about ice ages here in reference to Pipun Pinesio, the winter thunderbird, and the coming and going of the cold, the ice age. So that's a 23.5 degree angle, making, of course, that the whole circle 360 degrees. And so in reference to that sky and the heart of the sky and that Precessional Circle, you look at this map here, and this is a map of my people's understanding of the sky. This map is not complete. It's an ongoing process. When I initially started this research, I only had one story, and that story had to do with the Bear and the Big Dipper. And as time went on, and people were sharing with me the knowledge about the language, the knowledge about the ceremony, the knowledge about dreams, the knowledge about stories, the knowledge about traveling, and in reference to the sky, other constellations were shown me. So this map was done about 5 years ago, and at that time we'd re-established the knowledge of about 18 constellations in our sky, in the Cree sky. Now keep in mind, this is not Anishinaabe sky, not Ojibwe sky. This is not Dakota sky, Lakota sky, not the Sioux sky. This is not Siksika sky. This is not Blackfoot sky. This is Cree sky. The Blackfoots, the Crees, the Ojibways, and the Sodo, the Anishinaabes, the Lakotas, the Sioux people. They have their own maps, star maps, and some constellations are similar, and some constellations are different. Of course, because these cultures are seeing the sky from their own perspective, from their own longitude and their own latitudes, but also from their own environment and from their own weather patterns and from their own plant and animal patterns. And they're all reflective of what happens up there. So we're looking at that sky, and there's about 18 constellations we'd encountered and reestablished. And some of these constellations are layered on one group of stars, like I talked about the Big Dipper. And I talked about starting off with just the story about Mr. Muskwa, the Great Bear. And then pretty soon we added Ochik the Fisher, and pretty soon we added Mr. Tim, and pretty soon we added Chi Manak. And we started adding more stories about the same group of stars. And so these stories have multiple tellings to them. They're not just one story and that's it. Depending on what point is being talked about, then they look to the sky as a reference, and they tell their stories. So one of the dreams is to have that whole sky filled up with Ininew Kachagasak, the Cree stars, just totally filled, just like the Roman Greek is right there. When you're looking at the Roman Greeks right here, you're looking at over 2,000 years of knowledge that has been passed down, that have been written about, that has been talked about, that has been memorized, that have scholars working on. For our people, we don't have that luxury. due to the historical trauma that happened to our people, we lost anywhere from 75 to 85% of that knowledge base. So the knowledge keepers that had these held this knowledge didn't get the opportunity to pass it on due to, like I said, the historical trauma that happened to our people. And one of the ways that one of the elders shared with me about how that process happened was that he said prior to the coming of the Europeans, there were vast trade networks all over the Americas. When we're talking all over the Americas, we're talking about North America, Central America, and South America. So that's vast areas. And in these vast areas, traders traveled the routes, traveled their waterways, traveled the trails, and traded whoever they encountered. They traded with whoever they encountered. So they bought trade goods. So trade goods were going north, south, east, west. An example of that being the case is where I come from, Opaskwayak Cree Nation, on the banks of the Saskatchewan River near the Saskatchewan border. Opaskwayak, my traditional territories, on the banks of the river back in 1967. The town site where the town of the Paw is now, they were digging right where the Opaskwayak River meets the Saskatchewan River. At that point, there's high banks, and they were digging there for basements, and they uncovered a burial mound, a burial chamber. And in that burial chamber, they found a mummified person who was wrapped in a cloak, and she had sacred items with her, and she was painted red. And so the University of Minnesota, I think it was, sent archaeologists to come down to study these remains. So they took the remains back to Minnesota, and they studied them. And what they found was that the cloak that person was wrapped in was a cedar cloak, and it originated from BC. And they also found that the red ochre that she was painted in came from what we call now the Dakotas, the South Dakota and North Dakota. And they also found that she had with her an Atlatl. An Atlatl is a throwing dart, which magnifies your throw. So if you can throw a spear, say 6 feet, then with the Atlatl and using that dart, you could throw it 24 feet. And it magnifies the power too. So anyways, this Atlatl had a flint attached to it for the dart heads and for the balance on the pivot part of the Atlatl itself. And they dated that carbon on that flint, and they found the location was the Great Lakes area. So it was chert from the Great Lakes that was part of that Atlatl. And some of the ceremonial stuff they found was a seashell, and that seashell. That's hard to say. Seashell. And so, anyways, they found that seashell came from the Gulf of Mexico. So that there says on the banks of the Saskatchewan River, there's this person with this stuff from all over the place. So that establishes the fact that yes, there's trade routes going on there. There's trade happening, and it's not just local trade. It's spanning the continent. And so, anyways, the elder said when our people had first contact with Europeans in the Caribbean, some of those traders were there, and so they traded with those Europeans, and they took those good inlands, and they traded north, south, east, west. And as they did that, they didn't realize they had other trade goods with them that weren't visible. Those trade goods were the viruses. Those trade goods were the diseases. And those diseases went with those traders. And so we're told that anywhere from 75 to 85% of indigenous peoples across North America, South America, Central America were wiped out by these diseases prior to any of them ever seeing a European. And the way he said it was, if you have a village of 100 people, and each of these people know one word to a 100-word song. So you get all the people together and everybody can recite that whole song. And that represents the total knowledge base of your people. And everybody in that village contributes, and everybody has a job to do, and everybody contributes. And then one morning you wake up and 85 of them are gone. So you're left with 15%. And so you're trying to piece together what you knew before. And that's what happened to our people due to historical trauma. This is what happened to our people. So in reference to that sky, we lost 85% of that knowledge base. But the elder said, the way that knowledge was gained, that the methodologies that we use to gain that knowledge, we still do. We still practice those methodologies. Therefore, we can still reclaim that knowledge. That knowledge is out there. It's sleeping. It's waiting for us. And one of those pivotal steps in gaining that knowledge is Poamiak. Poamiak are dreams. Our people understood that dreams played a role in our lives. Dreams were very, very important to us. Dreams gave you guidance. Dreams gave you understanding. Dreams gave you hope. Dreams gave you direction. Dreams gave you these moments of clarity. Dreams gave you connections. Dreams gave you all these things, and they're a central part of our lives. And in our modern society right now, we associate those dreams with something extraneous, something subconscious. But our Indigenous people, we believe that these dreams aren't that. These dreams are an important part of our reality, and they intertwine with our reality, and they influence our reality, and they guide our reality. Even scientists dream. Even Einstein had eureka moments through dreams. So these things are important to us, and that's one of the very important steps in our methodological process. So understanding these concepts of stars and of the ability for people to recognize patterns, the ability of people to predict those patterns, the ability of using their prior knowledge to get all these things. Those are important steps of the scientific process. And every culture and every face of this earth use those things. So when they look at that North Star and they realize that that North Star is not moving, it's staying still over where north is. So they used that star, and they said they were traveling at night. If they wanted to go east, they would look at that star and they turn from that star. They turn 45 degrees or 90 degrees, I should say. 90 degrees, they turn with their shoulder aligned with that North Star. If they wanted to go east, they put their left shoulder aligned with the North Star. And when they did that and they turned 90 degrees, they understood that they were facing east. So when they were facing east, they picked a landmark in front of them, and then they walked towards that landmark with that North Star aligned with their left shoulder. And so they journey. And as they did so, they'd keep realigning themselves because they realized that as human beings, we tend to walk in big, huge, massive circles if we don't readjust our direction. And that is all dependent on what side of your brain is more dominant, your left side or your right side. That's the circles that you walk in. And so they had to keep readjusting and as they went along. And same with the west. If they wanted to go west, again, they turned 90 degrees, but this time with their right shoulder aligned with the North Star. And they'd be going west. So those are pretty common sense stuff about directional finders. Another directional finders are, of course, things like the sun. Everybody knows that the sun rises in the east, sets in the west. If you don't know, you should know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And also in the daytime, with that sun up in the sky, a lot of times the moon is up in the sky also. There's probably 2 or 3 times that the moon isn't up in the sky, and that's usually after a full moon or before a new moon. Other times that moon is up in the sky. And when you see that moon in the sky and the sun in the sky at the same time, that gives you a rough idea of directional finder, where it's what's east and what's west, if you can't tell just by the sun. So those are common sense directional finders. Other directional finders are at night, the moon rises in the east and sets in the west. The planets, if you look at the planets, and if you're patient enough, you'll see that the planet moves faster, a lot faster than the backdrop of the stars. And they move in the east-west direction also. They rise in the east and they set in the west. Even the stars themselves, when they come up at night, they come up in the east, they go across the sky, and they go to the west. So these are all simple directional finders, common sense directional finders. And our people, every culture is very observant about that because they lived under that sky, like I said. So if you have a big, the easiest way to look at it is you get a picture of a protractor in the mind with the degrees 0 to 180 degrees. So you're looking at the north sky, and on your left you have 0, and on your right you have 180 degrees. And you look directly ahead, and there's the North Star, and that's 90. So you have a right angle from your left side to your right side, a right angle. And then in reference to the sky, one really good indicator in the sky about directions and about time even is in the winter sky, there's a group of stars called Orion. Orion the Hunter. My people call this group of stars Pipon Negate Tichigo, which means the winter keeper. This star, the winter keeper, comes up in early October. It starts rising, and it stays with us all winter long till it gets about April. In April, it catches up to the sun, and when it does that, of course, we can't see it in the summertime because it's up when the sun is out. So anyways, if you look at Orion coming up right away, if you look at that that left picture of Orion tilted, right there, that's at a 45-degree angle. So if you're having your protractor and you look at that in the eastern sky, you'll see Orion coming up at a 45-degree angle, and he's tilted that way. So just by immediately looking at Orion and seeing he's tilted like that, you know it's early evening. And then you go to the central picture, and Orion is in the southern sky, and he's standing straight up, and that tells you that it's in between, half in between day, half in between. Half of the night is gone, right there. And then you go over to the right side, and again, Orion is at a 45-degree angle, but this time he's tilted the other way. So that right away, if you see Orion tilted that way, right away you know it's going to be morning pretty soon. So it's very late in the night. So those are our directional indicators, and again, just various simple angles. So you can see the animation here. Rising in the east, and here he is during the halfway through the night. You can see him standing straight up in the sky. And then tilted going down, 45-degree angle, the early morning hours. So Orion the Hunter, the winter keeper, Pipon Negate Tichigo. The thing about Pipon Negate Tichigo, the winter keeper, it's a seasonal constellation. It's not like the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper, which are circumpolar constellations. They're up in the sky all the time. Doesn't matter if it's winter, summer, spring, or fall. Now, Orion is only up in wintertime when it gets cold. And of course, that's why we call him Winter Keeper. And in Anishinaabe, call him the Winter Maker, because he brings the winter, he brings the cold weather with him. And the cold weather indicators for my people are referred to as Opaskwayak. Opaskwayak are spirit clouds. When you see the two spirit clouds up in the sky on a clear night, you'll know that it's going to start getting cold. And those spirit clouds, what we refer to, Opaskwayak, are the Orion Nebula and Andromeda Galaxy. When you see these with the naked eye, you can't see them with the naked eye, but it's very, very clear, and it's very, very dark, and your eyes have gotten adjusted to it. You can see them very good in the night sky, especially Andromeda Galaxy. You look at them with the naked eye, and they look like a faint smudge in the sky. And that's why we call them Opaskwayak, the spirit clouds, because those Opaskwayak are spirit, and there seems to be clouds in there, which are, of course, Opaskwayak. So the spirit clouds are seasonal indicators, weather indicators. And the thing about the Orion, the stars in Orion, stars in the Winter Keeper, there are all kinds of nebulas there in that space, that place in space. And one of the famous nebulas, of course, is the Orion Nebula. And nebulas are formed when stars explode. When stars explode, they're called supernovas. And they say when stars explode, they form big, huge gaseous clouds with dust particles and all kinds of particles and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of energy in there. And so they float around space. And eventually a lot of these dust particles and gas start gathering due to gravity. And then when they start gathering, they get to a certain point where they have gathered so much mass and so much energy that they start having nuclear fusion. And when they have nuclear fusion, new stars are produced. So in the process of a star's life, stars begin with a supernova. One star ends, it explodes, begins a supernova, and then when the supernova, that big huge cloud, some astronomers call that a nursery, a star nursery, because new stars are formed from that explosion, that supernova, and then they continue their life, and some of them burn energy faster than others, and so some of them become very unstable faster than others. An example of one of the unstable stars in Orion is a star called BeetleJuice. So if you look at BeetleJuice is an expanding red giant. And it has come near the end of its life's process. It has used up the majority of its energy. And as it does that, it expands and contracts. So in the image there, in the video, you can see it expanding and contracting. And of course, this is taken at a very, very large time span. So astronomers believe that at some point in the near future, when they're talking about near future, they're talking anywhere from thousands to millions of years. So they say sometime in the near future, BeetleJuice is going to explode. It's going to go supernova. So as it expands, one of the theories is when it's expanding outwards, it gets very unstable. And sometimes when they get unstable like that, at a certain point, they blow up, they explode. Another theory is that when it's expanding and then it contracts, again, being unstable, it contracts, and that sometimes it just keeps contracting. And when that happens, they say that's when they form black holes. So those are two options, I guess, that an old star has. It either expands and goes supernova, or it contracts and turns into a black hole. And each one of those things is part of the process of the life process of our galaxy, our reality. So you can see on the left-hand picture here, BeetleJuice. BeetleJuice, for those of you that might be interested, BeetleJuice is Latin for armpit. So that's BeetleJuice's armpit, the armpit of Orion. And in this picture, you can really make out the Orion Nebula right under star of Orion's belt. You can see the Orion Nebula right there, that little glow. Oh, I'm getting all kinds of notifications on my computer. So that is Beetlejuice and that is Orion, the Orion Nebula. How much time we got here? We got about 5 minutes. Okay, so when we're looking at these stars, one of the things we got to understand is that these stars, they look like they're on a flat surface up in space. Looks like they're all equal distance from our perspective, from our point of view. We're looking at that and we see the 3 stars of Orion, and right away our mind imagines that they're all in a line in space, when in actual fact they're not. If you look at that Orion Nebula, that Orion Nebula is 1,344 light years away from us. So what does that mean? That means it's far. As the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy says, space is big, really big. That's my favorite little quote. Anyways, so 1,344 light years. And then you look at Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice there, shining brightly and dimming and shining. Beetlejuice is 642 light years from us. So you can see the vast difference. One is in the thousands, one is in the hundreds. But from our point of view, they both look like they're shining from the same area in space. So what is a light year? A light year is an unimaginable distance. It's mind-boggling. They say light travels at 300,000 kilometers per second. 300,000 kilometers per second. So in order to find what a light year is, you take 300,000, you divide that, you multiply that by 60, and you get 1 minute. So 300,000 times 60 is 1 minute. Then you take that answer and you multiply again that by 60, that answer by 60, and then you get how much light, how many light years in an hour, how fast light travels in an hour, how many kilometers. So now you take that hour and then you multiply that by 24, and then you get 1 day. Then you take that day, that answer from 1 day, and you multiply that by 365. And then you get how far light travels in a light year. And we're talking about trillions here, trillions. And how big is trillion? Again, trillion is big, really big. So a trillion is 9. So the answer is 9.46 trillion kilometers in 1 light year. So that's 9.46 plus 10 zeros behind a 6. So that's a massively huge number. And that's why scientific notation is very important, because you're going to be sitting there writing zeros for a long time if you didn't use scientific notation. So that's gives you a rough idea of the distances and the backdrop of space. Things are not what they seem, but things are always in motion, in constant motion at all times. Everything is in motion. The one constant about our reality, about galaxies, about space, about everything, about life is motion. Things are in motion. Energy is in motion. Energy is everywhere, and energy is in constant motion. So with that, we're going to stop it there, and then we're going to turn it over to our moderators and field some questions.
Oh, that was great. Thanks so much, Wilfred. There's definitely some more learning there, as there always is when we're taking the time to sit and listen, right? And clearly a lot of knowledge that you have gained is through, your interactions with others that have this knowledge, but also by taking the time to be with and underneath the stars to make your own connections and those own realizations, right? They say the best teacher is the land, and we just need to give the land an opportunity to teach us. So I think that's super important. And it kind of maybe leads a little bit into one of the questions that we have is in your, as you've been learning more, have you been making connections to other cultures around astronomy? So I'm not exactly sure if that is with the Greek culture or maybe it's with the Maori in New Zealand and some of the knowledge that they have around astronomy. But I'll let you talk about that.
Yes, there's definitely connections involved. And I had the opportunity to speak with Indigenous people pretty much from all over the world. And in doing so, talking about the stars, there's one group of stars in particular that the majority of Indigenous people acknowledged as a very sacred place. And those are the Pleiades, the seven sisters. The way the Pleiades are situated in the sky, we can see them in our northern hemisphere at certain times of the year, and in the southern hemisphere at certain times of the year. And the Indigenous people, such as the Maori, such as the Aboriginal people from Australia, such as the Mapuche from Peru, they look at that Pleiades and they say that's a very, very significant place to the understandings of their people. And we call that Pagwangizik, the hole in the sky, and Anishinaabe call it the same thing. And they say that's where we originate from, the hole in the sky. So when they're talking about hole in the sky, they're not talking about a cute little story. They're talking about a wormhole. They're talking about a spatial anomaly. They're talking about a portal to another reality. So they're talking about multiple realities here, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about that too, because in the Mohawk culture, we call stars Ojista, and the seven dancers. So that's Pleiades. We have a whole story around the seven dancers. So it's an important story for us for sure. And I was wondering, just as we were talking right at the beginning, you were talking about the Big Dipper and how many different tellings that you have for the Big Dipper. And I wondered, maybe you could explain why you use the word tellings as opposed to stories.
Okay. So one of the things that we find is that as soon as we use the word story in English, and as opposed to a tumu in the Cree language, or I'm sure in any other language that they have different names, it's a sacred story. But when we use the word story, right away, in the English language, it gets compartmentalized and put in a little category, and that category is equated with things like legends, like myth, like fairy tales. And some of these stories that we relate, some of these secret tellings aren't those things. They aren't equatable with those things. They mean there's a depth of knowledge involved, and there's a sacredness involved to our people. And so that's one of our brothers by the name of Dr. Juan Carlos Chavez reminded us of that. We're trying to get away from that word tellings. From stories and maybe use tellings instead of the word stories.
Yeah, I remember talking to someone I consider an elder or knowledge keeper, Deo Hyundai, and he often references that as well. So I just thought it would be important to let others know that are on the call with us today, just to know that difference, right? Because I agree, it's super, super important. I'm just wondering, earlier in the day, in our first session, you talked about a word, chapan, I believe is how you pronounced it. And it's like, I love the idea of the one that binds us together. And you were talking about those things. And I know it's in your one of your new books that you created, right? And talking about that, but just that whole holistic approach and bringing everything together. We had a question come in that asked how we can take a more holistic approach when we're combining things like knowledge and culture to a big concept of medicine. And how can that all incorporate to help us out in moving forward? The big question.
This is sort of like the theory of everything.
Oh, and you only have 5 minutes.
Good, no pressure. Yeah, so one of the understandings that our people put forward is that everything is a spiritual based, and that word spirit right away, it has its own connotations to the English speaking population. When you say spirit, when we say spirit, we're talking about like I mentioned before, Kishigogok, beings of light, beings of energy. We're talking about energy. We're talking about light. We're talking about spirit. All these things are one, and being such that they're one, it refers to we are part of something else, which is our reality and other realities, and it's energy. Like I mentioned, energy is everywhere, and energy is constant, and energy changes form, but then it reverts back to energy, and that's what our people believe. We believe that we're energy, and we come here to visit at this place, and we visit, and then we revert back to energy, and we continue our journey somewhere else, and it tells us that everything is always moving. There's a motion that's always there, and nothing is never static. And even I come across the word traditional, and this is traditional, and that's traditional, and I have arguments about that because to me everything's changing all the time, because we live in we live with totally new concepts every day, and we have to adjust our thinking processes, and we have to utilize whatever's there. A good example was we're at a sweat lodge. We go to the sweat lodge, and I'm invited to the sweat lodge, and it's in the middle of a field, and it's wintertime, February, up in the northern plains in northern Alberta. And so I go out to this place, and there's a shack sitting out in the middle of a field. And so I said, "Where's the sweat lodge?" And they said, "Oh, it's inside the shack." So we go in the shack, and the shack is is right in the middle of the field. It's off the ground, and they've drilled holes in the shack, and they stuck the willows through the holes so they touch the ground, and that's their sweat lodge. And so we have a nice flat floor to sit on, so it's not cold. And then they drilled a circular hole in the center, and they cut off a 45-gallon drum, and they dropped it into the hole, and that is their pit for the rocks. And so then they covered that, so it's all enclosed. It's nice and warm. They got a stove in there, and I go aside, and they have a grill about a foot high. It's an iron grill. It's about maybe a meter wide, and about a foot off the ground. And they pile the rocks on there. Then they take 2 tiger torches, and they fire them up. And they say, and I'm totally flabbergasted. What are you doing? How are you doing it? What are you doing it? And they say, "Hey, that's natural gas. It comes from the earth. We're okay." It's the same idea. We're doing the same thing, same concept, just that we're doing it in a different way. We're utilizing 21st century technology. So yeah, so we have to adjust our thinking and go with the flow.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly a new one to me. I've never heard of that kind of sweat lodge ceremony, but hey, to each their own, I guess. I'm wondering if you wanted, oh, look, Jody's already pulling them up for us. I wondered if you wanted to talk about some of your books.
All right, so these books were done. The first one, Opaskwayak Cree Nation, was done probably about 4 years ago. And the next one that was put out was I Have 4 Lives, and that was done about in October. Beginning of October, it was published and put out. And Kitchigizik was just put out a couple of weeks ago. And Kitchigizik is from Good Minds of 6 Nations. And I Have Lived 4 Lives is ARP Books out of Winnipeg. And Opaskwayak Cree Nation, Good Minds has rights to that now. So they're able to print that, and they're negotiating for to be able to print the I Have Lived 4 Lives also. So all of these books are available, and I encourage all the school divisions to get these books and use them as a reference or as reading material for in Indigenous studies courses, for Aboriginal courses, but even for astronomy courses, just to give people a different reference point.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting too that, you know, these are your stories. These are your your tellings of the sky and the knowledge that comes from the Cree perspective, right? Because I know as
Right.
Mohawk, we have different ones. So just as teachers are using that, I think it's super important to remind them that this is only one, right? We can't put them all under the same umbrella because they are different. We have different stories, et cetera, et cetera. But it's such good knowledge, and there's so much. I always take more questions away than I think I take answers. So that's always the sign of a good time together. So I appreciate that. And I'll turn it over to you, Jody.
So we have come to the end of our session today, and I just want to thank everyone for listening, and hopefully you're maybe intrigued or interested to learn more and to listen to whenever we have people like Wilfred come and share their incredible knowledge. And hopefully you'll think about looking up when you go outside next, if the clouds are clear, and take a look at that night sky. It's such a gift that we're given every single night to see this beautiful magic that covers us every night. And I'm just gonna turn it, a little logistic thing. So I will be sending an email out with links to the books that were referenced here and some of the things that we talked about that you'll have access to, and as well as a link to our latest collaboration resource that Wilfred and others have been a part of. So if you want to hear more tellings and more knowledge shared through that resource, Lessons from Beyond, I will share that, and as well as Wilfred's website, I will share that as well through email. So I'm going to turn it over to Wilfred, and I do have actually, Wilfred, let me just share, because I know you had mentioned this before. So I'll pop this up for you to speak about, and then if you want to give us some last words.
All right. Okay, so what you're looking at here is Arcturus, the star Arcturus in the northeastern sky. Right now, and in the next maybe 4 or 5 days, we're supposed to get a really good view of the comet Leonard. And the comet Leonard is a once in a lifetime occurrence. The last time the comet Leonard was near Earth was when the Neanderthals were roaming the Earth. So that was quite a while ago. So it's back now for a visit, and then it won't be back again for a long, long time. So if you ever get a chance in the early morning hours, 5 o'clock, go outside, and if it's nice and clear, look in that area right there where the red indicators are, right above Arcturus and between the last star of the Dipper there, in Boots, in the area of Boots, the constellation Boots, and hopefully you can see the comet Leonard. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. I have another Zoom waiting right now. I got to take off. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you again, and have a good day, everyone. Thanks for